Hey everyone, Casey Irvine here, and welcome to the first video of my Building Overcut series. So Overcut is this new sort of passion project that I'm taking on. It's a sim racing game, but not your typical sim racing game, and it has a lot of inspiration from games like Valorant, where the idea is you take a very serious genre. In Valorant's case, it was like the strategic shooter. Um, and in my case it's sim racing, and you try to make it a little bit more accessible, a little bit more character oriented. Um, and for me it was really like, how can I take a sim racing game and make it a little bit more about a team result and more about the strategy, than just purely driving, which obviously there is some of that in sim racing, as is, but I wanted to really kind of bring that to the forefront. So the main idea, to quickly go over it, of Overcut, is that we take one of the really frustrating aspects of sim racing, which is crashing into other cars or having other cars ruin your race, or you make a mistake and you crash and then you're kind of out of the race for that 40, 50 hour long period, however long the race that you were entering was. And we kind of take that out of the equation. So cars won't be able to collide with each other. We don't have to deal with, who's at fault when cars collide. And then with the addition of, if you hit the barrier, there will be some sort of consequence, but your car is not going to be damaged. It'll just affect your time. And try to bring more of like strategy, tire management, and working with your team, as like the bigger highlight. And then the other thing is we will have drivers that will have abilities. And these will be things that kind of like help you with your strategy and give you certain advantages at certain times. I kind of liken it to um, DRS or push to pass in like the IndyCar or the F1 racing series, where at certain times you'll have this ability to kind of give your car a boost, maybe help with your tire management, things like that. So different drivers will have different abilities that can activate at different times, and they may or may not help a teammate as well. And then ultimately, you are trying to get the best result for your team, also for yourself, but really it's more about the team game. So that's the idea. Really quickly about Overcut, and why I want to make that game. So one of the things, this series is all about, what did I do this past week or so, since starting the series. And since this is the first one, you're here. It's been a little bit over a week, but the goal is to do these sort of updates as I progress, maybe every week, maybe every other week, kind of depending on how much time I have. So one of the things I did this week is I obviously built a launch website, just to kind of cap out the idea, also to just sort of put a stake in the ground and put some concept art out there. I've been watching a lot of tutorials on folks who are making games, especially with AI assistants. And one of the things that when I first started I didn't have was some concept art. So I really wanted to kind of put some out there just to even get myself excited and sort of make it feel a little bit more like a real thing that I could do. The imposter syndrome is definitely real when taking on a project like this and wondering if I can actually complete it. But yeah, so we launched the website. So the website's out there. And then I'm keeping track of my progress in GitHub, obviously. But with these kind of roadmaps, I finished this first milestone, which was really all about just bootstrapping the game and tools. We're using Unreal Engine 5.8, which has an MCP that comes with it that you can use. So that's really cool to kind of hook up agentic development. And I haven't used Unreal Engine before, and I haven't done any kind of game development with AI assistance before. So when I was sort of messing around with Unity and trying to build a game, this was almost probably a decade ago at this point, but there was no AI assistance around. It was all just sort of learning from tutorials and doing things. So as someone who's more programming oriented, not artistic at all, um, this is also about me learning, like, how does my approach to AI engineering, and agentic engineering match with game development? Because I've watched a bunch of tutorials where folks who are really artistic are able to launch games and do really cool things much easier now with AI. I don't know. My feeling right now is I don't know if it goes the other way as much, where my programming experience seems like maybe it's not helping me as much in game development, at least right from the start. So um, yeah, and so then we're kind of halfway through the next milestone, which is really just about getting something that sort of feels like a game, or at least feels like a car driving on a track. So we're starting to get some of that. We're still using kind of built-in assets. I took a little bit of a stab at generating my own assets. In fact, I kind of pulled one up here, where I had like some concept art, and then I'm using Tripo to generate something. This is probably the best version of what I have so far. I've generated much worse things, and I'm also playing around with using the Tripo CLI to try to see if I can create like a pipeline to generate some of this. But this is like a little bit of a teaser, and maybe it will come in the next video. I haven't decided how much I want to keep running with this in the next couple of weeks, because there's a lot I can do before I have any of these kind of game assets. But yeah, so I want to quickly talk about some of the things that I think are cool. I don't know if they're going to stick with me, but so one of the things that I kind of discovered early on is the typical, if you watch an Unreal tutorial or things like that, it's a lot about like jumping into the Unreal editor and like, physically kind of molding the environment and painting things and doing stuff like that, which I'm definitely open to, but that didn't really sound like how I necessarily wanted to think about things. So in just getting a basic track stood up, I I created this system where we can define what the track looks like in kind of like a simple, what ends up being, it's a custom kind of language, but it's really just, markdown or a text file that sort of defines some properties of the track, gives it a name and a description. And I don't know if my real tracks that will be in the game will be defined this way, but it's at least a cool way of defining a test track. And then it can define the different sections of the track. So these are sort of like a way that I can reason about what a track is and the different features of it. And I have a way for like scripts to be able to generate this, and then my AI agent and I can kind of work with this format, and then we have something that can take this format and generate it into a real track. At least a track that is a racetrack, maybe not something that looks great, but it is a track that exists in a world that a car can drive on. And then similarly, like we have like lines that the car can drive. So I'm a big fan of, you got to give your agent and your end-to-end test as much to do as possible. So I wanted the agent to have a way of like defining where the car drives and then sort of observing that. So this is how we do that. We can have these line files which define like the line that the car drives on with some other properties. And yeah, you can see there's a lot of comments here, but basically like it can kind of has this meta language of defining like how the driving line is defined and where the braking points are and where the turns are and the different target speeds. And we can like use this to generate input so that the car can drive around the track. And we can do things like, if we make a change, we can watch it, we can take screenshots as it drives around the track, and we can sort of play with the line that it drives, so we can sort of test different things and how it reacts. So I thought this was kind of cool, and one of the big features that came out of this past week of development that I thought was sort of unique in working with AI and finding ways that AI and I can work together and collaborate, that doesn't necessarily involve me doing a lot of hands-on editing in Unreal. The other thing that was kind of cool is, so we definitely generated some concept art, but we also have these like art pipelines. So we have a couple of local image models that we can use. One of them is Flux, and we're actually able to generate some cool artwork from using these local models. They don't have a ton of context, so you're limited a little bit in what you can do. But we kind of define this pipeline where if I ask, my Uber LLM, something like Opus or Soul or something like that, to generate some artwork, it knows how to like go and then use these local image models. It doesn't necessarily need to use something like Tripo or one of the AI models that it exposes, or GPT image 2 or whatever image generation model you want to use. It can use these local models to generate that image. I also set up GPT image 2 in Azure, so that my AI agent can use that to generate images where it needs to, and that's how we generated a lot of the concept art on the website. So GPT image 2 generated quite a bit of this, but some of the stuff that Flux locally generated was also very cool. So I don't want to diminish that. In fact, I wonder if I have something that I can show. If I go car, I don't know if I've kept any of it here. Yeah, I don't know if I kept any of it here. But there were definitely some cool things that Flux generated. Yeah, I didn't save any of them. Um, but yeah, so I think that's a really cool thing where you can have different models. Some of them are local, and then for some smaller things you can generate those locally versus like having to use a model that you pay for. I will say I have another local model. I forget which it is, but it helped generate this texture, which you'll see when I show you the first little bit of quote unquote gameplay in a minute. That the barriers use this texture, and so that was all sort of generated with this local model, and then ported into Unreal to paint these barriers. So I thought that was kind of like a cool workflow. Um, and then, like I had mentioned, a lot of this was just setting up kind of the things that I want. I've mentioned this when I was talking about how I built the loud cards, but there's a lot of these like touch grass scripts where I can just run the editor, run the game, build, run different tests, capture screenshots, things like that. But the one that I will sort of commit to showing every week at least is at least one lap. And so without further ado, we're gonna use this script called watch, and this was gonna launch the game and have it drive however many laps to tell it. We're just gonna do one lap for now, and then I can specify a line. So we're gonna do fast. I'm gonna do the cockpit view, and I can do things like turn on telemetry if I want, or eventually we can pick a different racetrack. But we will do this, and let's see. Do I have a full screen option? No, I have windowed but not full screen. But that's okay. So I'll be able to launch the script, and then we can watch what a lap looks like, and I'll talk you through that. All right, so we're loaded in. So the car kind of veers onto the racing line here, and the whiny sound you're hearing is actually like a generated engine sound. It's not a real asset. It's just one that was sort of procedurally generated. So because a racing game without any sound feels pretty weird. But as you can see, the car is driving around the track. There's the barriers that were painted with the texture that we've added. And again, not perfect, but it is definitely driving some kind of racing line. And as you can see, we're still using a kind of asset that came with Unreal from the KS Cars package, and the camera clips through the windshield. Like the placement isn't great, but I was happy that it at least could sort of feel like a sim racing game to some sense at this point. And then it just drives off the track, of course. Yeah, so is it a racing game yet? Not really, of course. But it is a car that can drive around the track. It has some, fake engine noises and tire noises and shift noises. It is the start of a thing that we can be able to build on to try to add some of the mechanics that we're looking at. And like I mentioned, I'm not sure when I'm going to start diving into generating my own assets. To put into the game. It feels like from some of the exploration I did this week, that might come later, just because I do want to try to get a little bit further in terms of like the systems and gameplay that's in place. And it's going to take me some time to learn the skills of even with AI how to do some of that. But yeah, that's what we have for this week. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully this series continues and we actually maybe finish a game at some point. But yeah, awesome. Thanks everyone. Happy coding.